Hello my dear students, welcome to class 12 biology. Today we're going to start with a new lesson, ecosystem. This lesson comes under the unit ecology. The complete ecology carries total 22 marks and this ecosystem lesson carries total 6 marks. And this lesson also important from the point of view of competitive exams. So pay attention and understand the concepts clearly. The following contents will be covered in this lesson: ecosystem structure and function, productivity, decomposition, energy flow, ecological pyramids, ecological succession, nutrient cycling, ecosystem services. So let us first understand what is this ecosystem. Eco means something which is related to the environment. So eco and which is forming the system. So what is this in the environment forming the system? It is the combination of non-living things along with the living things forming the system that is called ecosystem. So how can we define the ecosystem? It is a functional unit of nature where interaction of living organisms with themselves and with the physical environment. So what is this physical environment? Physical environment is nothing but the non-living things which is present in the environment, that is air, soil, water, etc. along with the living things. Living things are plants and animals. So along with the living things and non-living things, what are the system formed? The system is called ecosystem. This ecosystem has two main types, that is natural ecosystem. First one is natural ecosystem. The second one is artificial ecosystem. Natural ecosystem is the system in which there is no dependency of any other thing. In the nature it is developing by themselves. The system which is formed by the nature and which is taking care of themselves naturally. That is called natural ecosystem. We can further classify this natural ecosystem into two types, that is terrestrial and aquatic. Some of the terrestrial ecosystems are grassland, forest, desert. These are the some of the examples for terrestrial ecosystem. And examples for the aquatic ecosystem are oceans and lakes. So not only the naturally the ecosystems are present, even artificially we can create the ecosystem. How can we create the ecosystem? Minimum requirement to call it as ecosystem is the one non-living thing and the one living thing. So ecosystem can be as minute as a water droplet which will be having water and some of the microorganisms. So it is a combination of living and non-living thing which is living together. So a drop of water also forms the ecosystem. And as big as the ocean. Ocean is such a large ecosystem where the living and non-living things will be having the interaction together and they will be living together. So that is also ecosystem. It can be the large or it can be the smallest ecosystem. We can also create the ecosystem the same way artificially. Example for such artificial ecosystem are aquarium and crop field. In the aquarium, here what is present? In the aquarium, the fishes are present and some of the plants are present which are living things, and non-living things such as the stones, pebbles and light, temperature, all these things forms the non-living. Here is another example, that is crop field. Here also we can see the interaction of living and non-living things. Here the living things are, it may be the plants and some of the animals which are living in the crop field, and also a other non-living things like air, water. These are the non-living things. Together it is forming a ecosystem. So it is very simple to understand what is ecosystem. It is just interaction of a living and the non-living thing in the nature. If any living and non-living things together, it is forming a system that is called ecosystem. These organisms, they have organized themselves in different layers or different levels in the ecosystem, and that is called stratification. So what is stratification? It is a vertical distribution of different species occupying different levels in an ecosystem. Let me explain you by taking the example of tropical forest. You can see here some of the smallest plants are growing in the ground. So these are the herbs. Okay. So these herbs are having the ground level. Then coming to the next level, that is the shrubs. Shrubs will grow only up to certain length. So shrubs are forming the next layer. Then third layer, you can see some of the trees, and the trees which can grow still taller, they will form another layer. So like this, a layer or the levels, different levels which is occupied by the plants, that forms the stratification. So to understand this ecosystem, you need to understand the ecosystem structure and function. So let us see now first about the structure of ecosystem. What is the structure? What we can see, how the ecosystems are formed, that is the structure. So what it consists of? It consists of biotic and abiotic components. What are the biotic components? As I told you earlier, biotic components are nothing but living things. Here you can see the living organisms like plants and some of the animals which is present in the ecosystem. So all the living things which is present in the ecosystem, they will form biotic factors, and all the non-living things like air, wind, gases, light, temperature, water, all this will form abiotic factors. So mainly what the structure consists of? The structure of the ecosystem consists of abiotic and biotic components. So already I have told you abiotic components are air, water, soil, temperature, etc. And biotic components consist of producers, consumers and decomposers. So plants are the producers which will prepare its own food. Those are the producers. Plants are the producers here, and the animals which will feed on the plants, they are the consumers, and the decomposers are nothing but the microorganisms. Next, let us understand what is the function of this ecosystem. What is, if we have any kind of system, that system has to function somehow, right? So even in the nature, the system, whatever is there, that ecosystem, it is also doing some function. What is that function? We can understand this function by classifying them into four categories. First one is productivity, second one is decomposition, third one is energy flow, and the fourth one is nutrient cycling. So what these ecosystems are doing? They all are doing some functions. What is that function? The first thing is productivity. They are producing something. So all these things you will learn in detail later, but now just briefly I will tell you what is actually the function of this ecosystem. The productivity of the ecosystem is nothing but the biomass. What is there in that? It is producing something, that is called productivity. Then in the system, the decomposition process also taking place. Whenever the organisms will die, that has to be removed from the place, and that process is done by the microorganism. That process is called decomposition. So decomposition also taking place in the ecosystem. And then if they are producing the energy, that energy they can keep for themselves, or it cannot sustain for a long time in the same place. It has to travel from one place to another place, and that flow of energy is called energy flow. So that energy flow also taking place in the ecosystem. Nutrient cycling. Nutrient cycling is nothing but if the ecosystem is producing something and that is transferring as in the form of energy, that along with that energy, whatever is there, nutrients are also traveling. Okay, so that nutrients which is going from one organism to another organism, that is called nutrient cycling. So how it will travel, that will come under this nutrient cycling. Let us begin with the first one, that is productivity. If we take the example of the factory, in the factory what will happen? The factory will produce some goods, and that goods will be the main production of that particular factory. In the same way, if we take the example of ecosystem also has to produce something, that is called productivity. The rate of biomass production per unit area during a given time period is called productivity. So how can we say that something is producing? That is by measuring the biomass of the particular ecosystem. What is that biomass? The amount of the production of the energy in the plants, that is called biomass. So how can we measure this? By measuring the rate of the particular biomass per unit area in the given time period. We cannot simply say that it is producing. There should be some measurement to tell that the production is happening. So how can we measure? By taking the certain area and particular time, we can tell that this much biomass production has taken place. This can be measured in terms of weight or energy. So we can measure the biomass in terms of weight, like how much the mass has been produced by taking the weight of that. Or it can be measured in terms of energy, how much energy it has passed from one organism to the next organism. By measuring the energy also, we can tell this much amount of biomass has been produced, or else even by taking the weight of the biomass also, we can tell this much amount of biomass is produced. This productivity are of two types, that is primary productivity and secondary productivity. This primary productivity is the amount of biomass produced per unit area in a given time period by plants during photosynthesis. As I told you already, the production is mainly by the plants. So by the plants, whatever the primary production which is taking place in the ecosystem, that is called primary productivity. Is there any other things also in the ecosystem? Yes, definitely. Other than the plants, some of the animals are also present. They will also produce some of the energy or the biomass, and that will be referred as secondary productivity. So main our source of energy or the source of biomass production is by the plants. So in a given area, in a particular time, whatever the amount of photosynthesis taking place by the plant, that gives us the primary productivity. This primary productivity are of two types, GPP and NPP. What is the full form of GPP? Gross primary productivity. And what is NPP? Net primary productivity. To understand this in a simpler way, I can give you the example of salary. Okay, just imagine that you have joined a new company and the company has fixed your salary as 30,000. After a month, you are getting your salary and the salary is 25,000 to your hand. Okay, the salary which you got first month, that was only 25,000, but your salary was fixed as 30,000. So whatever the 30,000 which was fixed by the company, that is called gross salary. Okay, and what you are getting to your hand, that is 25,000, that is net salary. What happened to the remaining 5,000? It may be the PF deduction, it may be the tax deduction, etc. So whatever you are getting to your hand by hand, that is called net salary, and what was fixed, your total salary, that is gross salary. In the same way here also, gross primary productivity is the total amount of organic matter which was produced by the plants during the photosynthesis. There is no reduction in this. First, whatever the complete production will takes place by the plant, that is called gross primary productivity. But after some time, something should be reduced, right? Then only we can call it as net primary productivity. What is that reduction? That reduction is nothing but respiration. For the respiration process, the plants will take up some of the biomass for themselves. So whatever the gross primary productivity was there, which was produced by the plant, in that little amount of biomass was utilized by the plant for themselves. So that we have to reduce. So after reducing the small amount of biomass which was used by the plant for the respiration process, whatever remains, that is called NPP, that is net primary productivity. So let us see now what is secondary productivity. Secondary productivity is nothing but it is the rate of formation of organic matter by consumers in a given period of time. What is primary productivity? The productivity or the biomass which was produced by the plants. And the secondary productivity is the productivity or the formation of the organic matter by the consumers. Here, mainly whatever the things which is produced by the consumers, that is called secondary, and which will be prepared by the plants, that is called primary. What is decomposition? Decomposition is the process of breaking down of organic matter into smaller organic or and inorganic molecules by decomposers. What will happen? The dead organic matter, whatever is there, that will be broken down into simpler organic and inorganic molecules with the help of decomposers. For this process, the detritus are required. The detritus are nothing but the dead organic matter, fragments of dead organisms or fecal matter or dead leaves. Those are called detritus. Here you can see in the picture the detritus, which is nothing but the dead fallen leaves. It may be the dead plants or animals, or it may be the waste, organic waste, which will be undergoing the decomposition process. This is called detritus. And animals that feed on this decaying matter are called detrivores. Some of the organisms I have shown here, like snails, slugs, millipede, pillbug, earthworm, mite, springtail. These are some of the detrivores which will feed on the organic matters. That decaying organic matter they will feed, and they will help in the decomposition process. So they are called detrivores. Decomposition process is not as simple as we think. It involves so many steps which will be undergoing, and finally it produces the end result. The steps involves fragmentation, leaching, catabolism, humification and mineralization. What happens in the fragmentation? The first stage, the process of breaking down of detritus into smaller particles by detrivores. You have seen what are detrivores. These are the animals which will help in the breaking down process. So first what will happen? With the help of these detrivores, the organic matter will be broken down. The dead leaves and the plants and the animals waste, it will be broken down into smaller particles, and this breaking down process is called fragmentation, and this is the first step which happens in the decomposition process. Next process is the leaching. Leaching is nothing but soluble inorganic nutrients dissolve in water and goes down to soil and get precipitated. What will happen in this stage? The inorganic soluble nutrient, whatever is there in the detritus, the organic soluble, inorganic soluble nutrients will be present in the dead organic matter, and that will be dissolved, and it will go deep into the soil and it will get precipitate later. The next step is the catabolism. Decomposers releases enzymes to decompose detritus into simpler inorganic compounds. These decomposers are nothing but some of the microorganisms. The microorganisms will release some of the enzymes which will help in the decomposition of this detritus into simpler inorganic compounds. After this catabolism process, the conversion of detritus into humus will take place. You might have seen near your home, if you throw any vegetable waste or any of the fallen leaf waste into your garden, after some days the whatever you had thrown, that will turn into some darkish color thing, that is called humus. This humus is nothing but the end result of the decomposition process. After this formation of this humus, finally the mineralization process will occur. What is this mineralization? This humus will degrade to release inorganic substances and nutrients. The whatever the humus was formed, that will release some of the inorganic substances like carbon dioxide, water, all those things, and also it releases some of the nutrients like nitrogen, phosphorus, calcium, etc. So all these things will help the plants in growth, and also it makes the soil fertile. So this decomposition process is very necessary in the ecosystem, which is helping the organisms to grow and also to get rid of the unwanted the organic matters. Some of the factors will affect the decomposition process, like chemical composition and climatic condition. If the detritus is having the hard proteins like lignin or chitin, then the process will be little slow. Since these chemicals like lignin and chitin are little harder and it is difficult to break down into simpler molecules, it will take little longer time to break down. But if the detritus is containing the nitrogen and water soluble components or the chemicals, then the process of decomposition will be little faster. So it depends on what type of chemical the detritus is having. If the detritus is having little harder chemicals, then the process will be little slow. If the detritus is having a simpler, soft and easily soluble materials, then it will be fast. And also it depends on the climatic conditions. If the temperature is too low and the condition is anaerobic, it means if the oxygen is not available, then the process of decomposition will be slow. For the decomposition to occur in a faster rate, the climatic condition should be little warm and it should be moist. In such climatic condition, the decomposition process can happen little faster. So these are the two main factors which will affect the decomposition process. One is the chemical composition and another one is the climatic condition. So next functional unit is energy flow. So what happens in the energy flow? Energy will be transferred from one trophic level to the other trophic level. Here you can see our ultimate source of energy is sun. So sun is the ultimate source of energy. The energy which we are getting, that is not complete energy from the sun. The energy which is transferring from sun to the primary producers, who will receive the energy first? The producers will receive the energy from the sun. It cannot come directly to animals. First the producers will trap the energy, sun energy, and then this energy will be transferred to the next level, that is to the consumers. Then from the consumer, it will go to the secondary consumer. The consumer who is feeding directly the plants, they are called primary consumers. And next, when it comes to the next consumer, they are called secondary consumer. So here the rat is primary consumer and the fox is secondary consumer. So this is how the energy travels in one direction. So the energy flow will be always unidirectional. It cannot be in a two direction. It is always unidirectional. From sun it comes to the producer, and from the producer it goes to the consumer, and next it keeps on moving. So each time when the energy is transferring from the sun to the other level, it is not 100%. If the sun is having 100% of energy, then whatever the sun is releasing the energy, in that total energy, only 50% of the energy will be photochemically active radiation. Okay, rest of the 50% will be the other kind of radiation. So only 50% will be photochemically active radiation. In that 50%, complete 50% the plants cannot take. The plants can take only 2 to 10% in that. So whatever is coming to the plant, it is only 2 to 10% in that. The whatever the energy is transferred to the plant, 90% of the energy will be lost in the form of heat, and remaining 10% will be transferred to the next level. Okay, so what is coming from the sun, that is not 100%, only 2 to 10% is photochemically active radiation, and that 90% will be lost, and finally whatever comes to the next level, that will be only 10%. Let me give you the example of number. Suppose the 100 is the energy level here in the sun, the whatever the plant is getting, that is only 10. And next trophic level, when it is moving, it is only 1, because other 9% is going in the form of heat. So 90% is lost in the form of heat, and only 1% will be transferred to the next level. It keeps on moving like that. Every time the 10% only can pass, the other 90% will be lost in the form of heat. That is due to respiration or any other processes, it will be lost and it will go to the atmosphere again, and only 10% will be transferred to the next level. So this law was introduced by one of the scientists called Lindman's. So it is called Lindman's law of 10%. So this kind of transfer of energy in the form of food from one trophic level to the next trophic level is called energy flow. Always energy is nothing but in the form of food only it is going. Suppose if I take the example here, whatever the rat or the mouse is having, it is having the plant as a food, right? So energy is nothing but the food which is moving from one trophic level to the next trophic level. So we can define energy flow as transfer of energy in the form of food from one trophic level to the next trophic level. And when it is traveling, the food is transferred from one trophic level to the next series of organism. That connection is called food chain. So what is food chain? Transfer of food or energy from one producer through a series of organisms. Here you can see the example of food chain. Here you can see in the beginning the grass or the producers are there. Always the food chain begins with the producers. Why? Because they are the producers who can prepare their own food. Then this grass will be eaten by grasshopper, and this grasshopper will be eaten by frog, and this frog will be eaten by snake. Snake will be eaten by hag, and this will be eaten finally by the decomposers when it dies. So this type of connection is called food chain. The chain is created from producers to the decomposers, that is called food chain. This food chain is of two types: grazing food chain and detritus food chain. By seeing the example, you can understand, and even by the word grazing and detritus, you can understand what may be the difference. Here, grazing food chain begins with always with the producers, and in detritus food chain, it will be always with the dead organic matter. Here, the living oak leaf, this is a producer which will be eaten by the caterpillar, and then in turn it will be eaten by other consumers. And in the detritus food chain, the dead oak leaf will be eaten by the earthworm, and then it will be eaten by the other consumers. So the food chain keeps moving in the opposite direction, that is from the decomposers to the next consumers. So if the food chain starts with the dead organic matter, then they are called detritus food chain. If the food chain starts with the producer, then it is called grazing food chain. Here are some of the terms which you need to understand. The first one is trophic level. What is trophic level? Each level in food chain is called trophic level. Here I didn't mention, but usually what we will call each level as trophic level. This is the producers is one of the trophic level, the next trophic level, and this is the tertiary trophic level. Like that it keeps on moving. Next, standing crop. Each level in food chain has certain mass of organic matter at a particular time. Whatever the food chain is there, it may be the producers or it may be the consumers. Each organism, they have certain organic matter. That mass of organic matter at a particular time is called standing crop. Next is food web. The natural interconnection of food chain is called food web. Sometimes what happens, this food chain is not as simple as it was shown in the picture. It may be the interconnection with the other food chain also. For, for example, the mouse which was eating the grass, it can also be eaten by the eagle, or it may be also eaten by the snake. So there is the interconnection with the food chain. So that kind of interconnection is called food web. So that is also present in the nature, which is forming the network that is called food web.